Hello, my name is Leo Vasquez with the National Consortium for Creative Placemaking and New England College, and thank you so much for joining us today in our first webinar of the 2019-2020 season, and this is our overview of creative placemaking called Creative Placemaking. Oh, that was going to be my big reveal there. Creative Placemaking Integrating Community, Cultural, and Economic Development. Now, we do have the chat area open, so if anybody has any questions at any time, any comments, please feel free to write them in the chat area. You can also ask me to speak more slowly, speak more quickly, although I don't know that you necessarily want me to speak more quickly, or raise questions. We're joined today by my colleague, Andrea Orlando, our community director, and there she is. She's waving hello. She's going to be in the background as well. Now, after I do my presentation, we'll be happy to unmute the microphones and take any questions. Of course, you're always welcome to ask any questions in the chat box at any time. If we do hear a lot of sound coming from your mic during the question and answer period, we may have to just mute you just as a courtesy to everybody else. Well, okay, folks, why don't we go ahead and start? And thank you so much for joining us here. I do want to let you know about some upcoming events and deadlines, and we got a few exciting events for the fall. So for those of you who are interested in going to the National Creative Placemaking Leadership Summit in Phoenix, October 1st, that's next Tuesday, is the deadline for scholarship applications. We provide scholarships, sometimes full, mostly partial scholarships, to social practice artists, to civic volunteers, and to students. You may have heard about the new certificate for creative placemaking program. It's actually not new. It's been revised. October 10th is the last day for registration. If you have any questions about the certificate program, please feel free to reach out to me. Now, October 10th to 12th is our Midwest Creative Placemaking Leadership Summit in Cincinnati, and really excited about this. I'm always excited about the summits, but this time we're exploring how creative placemaking can address climate change and build more inclusive communities and promote public health, and also about something we call placekeeping, which is about protecting the character of a place. Now, I wanted to let you know, as a thank you for joining us today, I am offering you all a 20% discount to be there at the Midwest Summit, and you could just use promotion code PARTNER20. Now, if you've been to a summit, you know how good it is, and you know how you get to meet so many people and how fun it is, etc. And if you've never been to a summit and you've been to conferences that were kind of, this is going to be a really pleasant surprise for you. So, for those of you who are in New York, New Jersey, or just want to come out, and or maybe you got a thing for Frank Sinatra, come join us in Hoboken on November 4th for our first mixer of the 2019 season. It won't be our last, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and hope you can join us. And then November 14th to 16th, we have, again, the National Creative Placemaking Leadership Summit in Phoenix. We expect to get the agenda out pretty soon. The difference between our regional summits and our national summit is our regional summits focus on a particular area. Like the Midwest Summit is focused on Midwest. National Summit explores issues that are affecting communities throughout the United States. Anyway, if you can't make it to one, try to make it to the other. Can't make any of these, try planning to join us for one of our other events in 2020. We're going to have plenty of them. Okay, now, the National Consortium for Creative Placement. What do we do? Well, We do webinars, of course, but webinars are part of our effort to help build and professionalize the growing field of creative placement. There's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of people who are saying they're doing creative placement when they're really not. And so we're helping to, build a set of shared values, shared professional practices for the field. And we are national and we are a consortium. We work with more than 100 organizations, including more than 22 state arts agencies, and we model the practice that we ask other people to do. Okay, here's my own shameless self-promotion. I'm going to take a little sip while you read that. I hope you like my emceeing. I didn't put that in the list, but I hope that's also a skill set that you appreciate as well. Okay. So what are we going to do today? Well, the purpose of the 3 goals for today's webinar. We're going to talk about what creative placemaking is and what it's not. And we're going to talk about it in the context of sustainability, and then particularly for any urban planners, AICP members who are with us today, we're going to talk about creative placemaking as an ethical act. Now, you don't have to be a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners to I think appreciate the ethics conversation. I think there's some good a good ethical code for anybody who works in community to follow. So whether or not you are an AICP planner, I hope you'll stick around for that conversation. Okay, again, all right. Oops. Okay, now let's begin with just talking about arts, the benefits of the arts. Hopefully, I don't have to convince you that arts are good for society, but let's just say a few words about why the arts tend to be good for society. Well, based on research that we found, I'm going to just go clockwise and then go in a spiral into the center. So we'll start at essentially the 11 o'clock position, and we see that the arts tend to be associated with healthy aging, both physical health and mental health. People who are involved in the arts tend to age, tend to be healthier as they age. Now, as we move clockwise, you see a mural there, and that's in Joplin, Missouri. The arts helps us to tell our stories, to express what we believe are truths about ourselves and our communities. And in Joplin, this is a mural that was put up after some deadly tornadoes there, and it represents both what was lost, but also the hopes and aspirations of people in the community. Now, I said that the arts tends to be associated with healthier aging. There's also research that shows that young people and children who are involved with the arts tend to do better in school and tend to have tend to have more success in their lives in various measures compared to their peers. Those young people who participate in the arts. There's a strong correlation between participation in the arts and holding a pattern. So, of course, creativity is very well connected to innovation. There's a little picture of a bandstand just below the horses and the animals. And, of course, the arts are fun. The arts add beauty to our lives. And that's important because what matters, it matters more how we think about what's on the ground than what the objects are. And we'll talk about that more later. And there's a connection between arts and wealth. Certainly, arts can bring more dollars into a community. There's some interesting research done by the NEA that shows that the wealthier you are, the more educated you are, the more likely you are to participate in the arts. Now, what I just said can make a few people nervous because they say, "Are you promoting gentrification?" No, I am not. And we'll talk more about that later. I'm not promoting displacement. I'm not promoting, and I recognize, like all of us creative placemaking do that the arts, like everything else that helps make a community more livable, can promote. It can lead to gentrification. However, in a market-based society, which is what we live in, communities need to attract and retain wealth to thrive. And the question is not whether there should be or should not be any wealth, which is impossible. You simply can't thrive without wealth. The question is how that wealth is circulated in a community. And then finally, what you see in the middle there is a cave painting from, I think, about 35,000 years ago. The arts are older than our cities, older than agriculture, older than a lot of other things that we consider to be essential to the idea of civilization. So the arts are part of our humanity. In fact, the arts may have preceded us because there's some interesting research being done that shows that Neanderthals may have also practiced art as well. Okay, great. Well, why don't we move on? And again, please feel free to type in your questions or comments at any time. Now, so we talked about art, and that's the creative part of creative placemaking, arts and local culture. Now, I'm not going to talk so much about local culture other than to say that arts reflects culture, culture-informed art. You can't talk about one without the other. So when we say creative, we're talking also about history, heritage, other types of cultural activity that can be represented in various art forms. Now let's talk about place and placemaking. I'm an urban planner by training, and like urban planners, architects, landscape architects, engineers, we're often trained to think about the nouns, buildings, streets, sidewalks, parks. But what a place is more than just a collection of nouns. It is a set of adjectives and nouns, and that's how most people understand place. When somebody asks what is this place, they're not asking how many trees are on the street, on the sidewalk. They're asking about the adjectives. So as you can see, what we work with in placemaking is we're working with the gestalt, the zeitgeist, the soul of a place, and not just the objects themselves. And what contributes to that is the relationships that people in that geographic area have with one another and with the objects. As placemakers, yes, we do have a focus on objects. I mean, we want to know, okay, there should be chairs, there should be benches, maybe there should be trees over there. But we don't limit ourselves to that. Our primary focus is on how people are thinking, how people believe about, feeling about the area, about the other people in the area, because that's going to have as big an effect, maybe more of an effect, on their behaviors within that area. Okay. So now, the term creative placemaking was coined in 2010 by Ann Markison, an economist and urban planner, and Ed Godwa, now Ann Godwa Nicodemus, a planner and former dancer. Ann Godwa Nicodemus, by the way, is the founder of Metris Arts Consulting. I'm going to just give you a little bit to read through that. Okay. Now, this is from the first page of creative placement. Now, there's a few things I'd like to put your attention to here, and they're in bold. First, it's about partners. Okay, it's not about a developer or an artist or a public official coming in and doing and making a bunch of changes. It's about the partnership. So when somebody says who should lead this, it's the partnership that should lead it. Now, honestly, building the partnership can be the hardest part of this work. Strategically shaping the physical and social characteristics. Creative placemaking is intentional. It's not just about doing fun stuff to make people feel good. It's about being aware of what are the impacts that we're trying to reach. What are the challenges? It's not just about the projects. Yes, we want the projects to go well, but it's about what we can learn, what kind of impact we have. Creative placemaking animates public and private spaces. There's no such thing as having too much fun. Okay, have you ever met have you ever met somebody who said, "Hey, I gotta get out of here. I'm just having too much fun"? No, neither have I. So we are rejuvenating. We're improving. Now, you think improving. What does that mean? Well, the the partners working with community members, with stakeholders, they define what improvement means for a community. It's going to be different for every community. But the thing is, nobody wants a community to get worse, whatever worse means. Everybody wants a community to get better. Our challenge is how do we define what does better mean? Again, bring diverse people together. Now, for years, there have been people working on arts in cities, and typically it's been, well, maybe an arts council working with Chamber of Commerce, or Chamber of Commerce working with public officials. Creative placemaking says that the implication of the work and the way it's practiced well, so what's celebrated, is when we or the creative placemakers can bring people who represent the vast diversity of the community together to work on a project. Now, do we ever get everybody in the same room? Is anybody perfect at getting every form of representation? No. That's why we don't just do one project or have one meeting or send one email. We almost never get it completely right. We just keep trying to be less wrong. Now, the third graph, and this is really critical, especially for my friends in planning, architecture, civil engineering, that it's not about one building. Okay, it's not about one thing. It's about a combination. It's about a lot of different things connecting to one another. So this is what makes creative placement these are some of the things that make creative placement different from other forms of working of making communities better through the arts. Now, what does this mean? So the traditional way of doing things was, well, we focused on projects and what do we want to do? And we want to build a big performing arts center, and then good things will happen. And that has led to things like Lincoln Center, which is a wonderful space. And I've gone there and I've won the show. And they're doing a lot now in connecting the community. But the thing you should know about Lincoln Center in New York City is half a neighborhood was destroyed to create Lincoln Center. Lincoln Center was created to keep wealthy people from spending their entertainment dollars outside of Manhattan. And that's not creative placemaking. That's more urban renewal. That's more colonialist than anything else. Creative placemaking is first about people, and then people working together to build partnerships, and then the projects. I say to the students in the certificate program and to everybody, it's not about, don't tell me about what you want to do. I know you've got a lot of ideas that you want to do. I want to know, what is it that you want to achieve? What are the challenges that you want to address? What are the opportunities that you have to address them? What are the resources available? Who can help? Then let's talk about what should we do. Okay, folks, just a reminder that you can still ask questions at any time and type in any comments, and I will, as I'm able to, stop and respond to your comments. Okay, now, the National Consortium for Creative Placemaking, we started in 2012, although I was actually doing this work with an institute I had at Rutgers University called Arts-Built Communities back in 2008. Our model for creative placemaking has 6 pillars. And these are not prescriptions on what you should do, it's just what to think about when you're doing creative placemaking. And I'm going to start at 12 o'clock position and go clockwise. So quality of life. We want to enhance quality of life for as many people as possible. Not just the people who enjoy the arts, but as many people as possible in the community. Now, what is quality of life? Well, again, we don't tell people what their quality of life should be. We listen, we find out, and we say, what are the elements that would make a good quality of life for you, and how can creative placemaking help create that? Similarly, economic opportunity. We want to make sure that the work we do is the work that all creative placemakers do is creating new opportunities for mobility, for enhancing or at least maintaining standards of living in communities. Shared leadership. True collaboration it literally means working together. It's not just about going to one meeting. It's not just writing a letter saying, I think you're a wonderful person and I support what you want to do. It's about people sharing the risk, the reward, the credit, and the blame. This may be the hardest part of our work as creative placemakers. The ideas are easy. In fact, one of the biggest problems is we have too many great ideas. The challenge in this work is helping people go from somebody should to we could to I will. Freedom and belonging. I'm going to get a little personal here and say that as an immigrant, I'm very concerned about the anger, especially directed at certain groups of people in our society. And civil society is best when everyone feels that they are valued, that they can be respected, that they can be free to be who they are in that society. If you can't, if you don't feel that way, then you're probably going to feel like a second or even third class citizen or any kind of citizen at all. And it's less likely that you're going to want to really fully participate in the community in the way everybody else is. So freedom and belonging is not just about making people feel good. It's a critical element of a healthy civil society. And asset-based orientation. is the idea that we build on what we have. First, we got to know what we have, what's available. And that's not just old buildings. That's about the talents, the wealth of knowledge and skills and uh, concept and connections that people have in the community. Let's first see what we have before we say, oh, we've got to import something. And a place-based orientation is the idea that we understand what's special, what's about the place we're living. Again, remember, a place is more than just the sum of its parts. It's a dynamic set of relationships between people and their built environment. A lot of what makes a place, a lot of what we understand about a place is not going to be written down. It's got to be something that we have to surface, that we have to make explicit in our work as creative placemaking. And so a big part of this work is about simply understanding what makes this place distinct, what makes this place special. How do we understand the place through other people's eyes? Because everybody has a story about a place, and most people's stories are not the exact same as anybody else's. All right. So let's talk about what this looks like. Okay, so I'm going to focus on some communities in New Jersey that we've worked on simply because I know those communities best, and if you have questions about specific things, I can answer those. So, Glassboro is a town in southern Jersey. It is a rapidly growing town. Rowan University is centered there. And I don't know if you've ever played Sim City, where just things, or one of those games, maybe like Game of Empires, or whatever it's called, where like buildings sort of just pop up everywhere. Well, that's kind of like what Glassboro is like. You show up there, there's a vacant lot, and 2 weeks later, something's wrong. So one of the challenges for a place like Glassboro is how do new members of the community connect with long-standing residents of the community? Because one of the things that happens when there's rapid social change, such as new people coming in, is that there's a lot of tension. The longtime residents, they're concerned. The change can feel threatening. It's disconcerting, and people, as people want to do, we are species that love stories, so we create stories about other people, create narratives, and those narratives become our truth. And then the new people have their own narratives about the place and their own experience of the place. And so, you see there's so many communities where there's so much tension. So community development using arts, art making, or in this case, kind of in Glassboro, like creativity, sort of using games to help people talk with one another and share ideas. In this case, they're exploring ideas for a new town square in the middle of Glassboro. Economic development. The Valley Arts District is in a town called Orange, which, fun fact, it was the historic. It was the nation's center of hat making in the early 20th century. It was a place that historically has attracted a number of immigrants. An industrial city, and as you know, with so many industrial cities, as the industries left, a lot of places went vacant. So the Valley Arts District, it's created by an organization called Valley Arts, which itself was created by a community development corporation called HANDS, worked on equitable economic development there. So they did things like develop mixed-use properties where with permanently affordable spaces for artists, and an old house became the Hat City restaurant. An old ironworks garage became a place for teens to learn craft making. Cultural development. Perth Amboy. Now, Perth Amboy is, by the way, if the name sounds familiar, it may be, and you're not from Jersey, it may be because you are a Warner Brothers fan, because apparently there's a lot of references to Perth Amboy, New Jersey in the Warner Brothers. I don't know why. Researched it. Can't tell you what's going on there, but I can tell you that Bugs Bunny's travel agent is from Perth Amboy. So that has absolutely nothing to do with anything else, other than the cartoons are a form of art. But here's Perth Amboy. It is a colonial era city from the 1700s. At one point, it actually competed with Manhattan as a center of commerce. And it has become, over the years, in the 20th century, it was a port of, well, what the immigrants call a port of entry city, a place where a lot of immigrants came. Today, it's primarily the population is primarily Latino and very diverse. There are a lot of artists who live there, visual artists, musicians, etc. However, if you'd gone to Perth Amboy just even 5 or 6 years ago, you wouldn't have known that, except for maybe occasional festivals that they have. But you didn't see public art. You didn't see people on the street. You didn't see festivals. I mean, you didn't see, unless you went to a restaurant, you didn't see musicians. Well, as part of the creative placemaking strategy, there was a concerted effort to make more people aware of the wealth of creativity in the community. So some of the things that have come out of the creative placemaking plan for Perth Amboy include a waterfront arts festival that happens in May. Now you think, oh, waterfront festival, everybody has a waterfront. Or every place with a river or by a bay has a waterfront, and people love their waterfronts. Well, Perth Amboy is the kind of place where, because the waterfront has been industrial for so long, or parts of the waterfront were used for a yacht club, which most people in Perth Amboy don't own yachts. A lot of people have become disconnected from their waterfront. And in fact, the geography of Perth Amboy is such that you could be standing right in the middle of downtown and have no idea you were in a waterfront community. You just couldn't see the waterfront. So the festival was both to promote the arts as well as encourage more people to value the waterfront. Now, this has a benefit. You think, okay, that's nice, but why is that important? Well, in this case, Perth Amboy was one of those cities that suffered a lot of damage in Sandy. And as anybody who's involved in environmental planning knows, that one way to protect waterfront communities from more damage is to minimize development along waterfronts. The more impervious surface, like parking lots, that you create, the less land there is to soak up water when it rains. So valuing the waterfront is more than just getting people to recognize that they've got this great asset. It's also about protecting this land from overdevelopment. Okay, let's keep going. So an asset-based orientation. What you see here looks like a shoe store, because it was. It's actually the original home of the showroom in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Asbury Park, one of the coolest towns in America. This is a case of using an existing asset, a vacant shoe store, They had the concession stands up at the front, and they had the screen in the back where the storage room for the shoe store was. Now you think, the theater and a shoe store couldn't work. Well, actually it did. They showed independent films, it became a community thing, and then they moved across the street, built a three-story building, which continues to show independent films and art house films, and is still a community, and has a great concession stand with stuff that you wouldn't find in your typical um, AMC or Bowtie Cinemas concession stand. Okay. Oh, I guess you're all enjoying the presentation because nobody has any questions. So, okay. All right, a place-based orientation. This is Hackensack, New Jersey. Who needs a house out in Hackensack? Well, about 43,000 people do. For you millennials, that's a reference to a Billy Joel lyric. So Hackensack was a place where they did the creative team put together a vision for Hackensack about how to make Hackensack a greener, cleaner place through creative placemaking. And part of it was, let's have art that celebrates our story. So I love the top picture there. You see Barbara Ra. You see a mural of him next to I think that's Lafayette. Some people thought it was Hamilton, but I think it's actually Lafayette. So, because Hackensack also has an interesting colonial history. Now, the interesting thing about it's not only a place-based orientation, how the art tells a message about the place, but also is a good example of asset-based orientation, because the murals that you see of Barbara and Lafayette and down to the left of the old historic train line, they were painted on construction panels that were put there for safety reasons. These big wood plywood things, ugly. Who wanted to look at them? So here's a problem. Here's an eyesore that is now an asset because it's now a canvas. And so for a while now, those murals are elsewhere in Hackensack right now. But it's an example of using something that somebody might think of as a problem and turning that into an opportunity. Okay, so there's a question from Carmela, I think it is. I don't have my glasses on. Could you speak more about asset-based orientation using space like theater and shoe store? Arguments and models for the site, share with developers. Okay, so an asset is any resource that can be engaged to address, to help you reach a goal. So the important thing is, how do we, identifying your goal. So in this case is, so let's say your goal is to bring more people to Charlotte or to a particular neighborhood in Charlotte. I assume we're talking about Charlotte, North Carolina, but if it's something else, please let me know. To a particular neighborhood in Charlotte. An asset are the creativity, the creativity that's already in the community. So let's say you take a neighborhood, and I think your arts district is, I think it's called Uptown, or I forget. I'm sorry. Excuse my ignorance but I know that you all have a pretty robust arts district there. So it may be about, one asset is the people. That there's some really interesting things going on. They're doing interesting things but nobody knows about it. They're not making money because nobody knows about them. They don't have a marketplace. So that's an asset that you can work with. Another asset is an empty building. Any empty building can be used as some kind of arts space. If it's an empty storefront, it could be a pop-up shop. It could be a movie theater, you know, a small one. Now, is it going to make as much money as a sixplex movie theater that's an anchor in the mall? Of course not. But um, you know, an empty house can become work-live studios. Um, some examples that I would like. Actually, one of my favorite examples is not that far away from you. I mean, well, yeah, it is, but it's closer to you than it is to me. Is the Village of the Arts in Bradenton, Florida. You had a completely residential neighborhood of one-story ranch houses that has become um, a this really cool arts center. People have bought that, you know, artists and others have bought these houses and decorated them. So this neighborhood that had been, I don't want to say abandoned, but it had been neglected, where there was a lot of crime, has now become a tourist attraction. So, you know, one of the most famous examples of an asset-based orientation is the torpedo factory, and I think it's Alexandria, Virginia, an old torpedo factory that has become an art center. We see a lot of these around the country. So I'm hoping those examples are good. If feel free to send me an email if you like, or if anybody else in the webinar today has any recommendations. Okay, so Wallace Simpson Woolgate Park, and okay, so thank you for that, and it's in one of the Carolinas. So okay, now I've got about 17 minutes here, and I do want to save time for you to ask questions. So I want to actually, and this is probably, I'm going to go a little more quickly. This is something I wanted to add because there's phrases here that you may have been hearing, and I just want you to know what the difference is. So, creative class comes from it was from the early 2000s. It's a theory by Richard Florida, who that you should use creative class to revitalize communities, and that's the idea that you focus on people who are in various creative fields, and he is talking about more than just artists or architects. He's also talking about lawyers. And, well, of course, we know lawyers can be very creative. Engineers, etc. People we may not think of as necessarily as artists, but who are doing work in creative, who are doing creative work. Now, what brings all these people together is often they tend to be higher paid. They tend to be highly skilled, highly educated, and so they tend to also be highly paid. So it's kind of logical to think, well, if you have more of these people, you're going to have more money in the community. Now, that is true. However, the creative class model has been interpreted. One of the big criticisms of it, and I think it's a fair criticism, is that it's been interpreted as a justification for displacement of lower income people. That it's been used as a way to justify basically ignoring lower income, the demands of lower income people. And in fact, Richard Florida himself in his book in 2002 said that the creative class model seems to work for every community except low income African Americans. To me, and based on our values that I discussed, that if you have an economic theory that is helping everybody but somebody else, then you should get a better economic theory. So we appreciate the fact that Richard Florida has made more people aware of the value of artists. However, I personally don't believe in a creative class. I know some people use the word creative as a noun, like we want more creators. I don't use that, and I don't believe in a creative class because that implies that there are certain types of people who are creative, and there's others who are not, and I simply do not believe that. Creative placekeeping is something on the opposite end, is something that other people are talking about using, as an alternative to creative placemaking. And creative placemaking, creative placekeeping talks about protecting community characters, about equity. Now, based on what we talked about, you'd probably say, well, that sounds like creative placemaking to me. And I'd say, yeah, that is creative placemaking. As long as we value equity, value inclusiveness, we're talking about the same thing. One of my concerns with the term creative placekeeping and is that I'd wonder who gets to decide what is being kept. Are we going to keep everything? Are we going to keep the injustice? Are we going to keep the class differences? If we're not going to keep everything, then we have to choose what we're going to discard, what we're going to add. That means we're doing creative placemaking. So I just want you all to understand how we see the differences in these areas. So you know what? I'm going to stop here because I feel like I did talk about ethics, about values. I do want to save time for people to ask questions or offer comments. So the creative placemaking, okay, so I've got a question to send out the creative placemaking NEA PDF link here. Andrea, if you don't mind, would you mind would you mind getting the link and sharing that with everybody? Is that okay? Okay, terrific. Thanks. Andrea's going to do that. I'm going to try unmuting all. So, okay, so anybody who's talking, anybody who is got hold music on, at the count to 3, I'm going to unmute all so that if anybody wants to speak, they can. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. All right, you're all unmuted. So if anybody has a question, comment.
I am just finishing up at 11.
Okay, folks. So if you do want to talk, if you want to talk on the side, that's fine. But just please mute yourself. Otherwise, I'm going to have to mute everybody again, and I'd really like to make more of a conversation. So the question from Carolyn is, what tools or standards do you use to measure the success of a creative placemaking project? Well, just as we work with partners, with community members to establish the goals, we also work with those same people to establish the metrics for success. So you might say, one of the questions I like to ask, what does success look like? So if somebody is saying, well, if somebody's saying, well, we want our community to be safer. Well, what does it mean to be safer? What does it look like? Well, it means that more people are walking around at night, that more people who feel comfortable walking around by themselves at any time during the day. Creative placemaking tends to focus mostly on how people feel about a place, so we can measure that by doing surveys to ask people about their feelings about the place. There's something called pre and post test. For those of you who are not familiar with survey methodology, where we ask people maybe before we do a survey, before we do the mural, we do the project, about their feelings about the place, and then afterwards. We might ask people who are involved in the making of that artwork or the event. Do they want to be more involved with their community as a result of being with it? So there's not a one-size-fits-all. And that's the thing, that's one of the actual challenges of creative placemaking, is that we try not to be prescriptive, because once we are prescriptive about it, then it makes it hard to be truly creative. So we have some guidelines but we recognize that there's a lot of diversity, there's a lot of uniqueness. Okay, so Claudia is, I'm going to mute Claudia because she's having a little trouble there. Okay, so Andrea did post the NEA white paper. It's a good read. It's only about 30 pages. So I'd recommend that everybody take a look at it. And Ann Markson is still active. You could see a lot. You could see her on YouTube. Ann Godwin Nicodemus is a friend of ours. She's with Metris Arts in Easton, Pennsylvania. Okay. Other comments, questions? Anybody want to share any aha moments? Anything surprised you here? Yes? No? I don't know. I need another cup of coffee. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. So let me just since we do have a few more minutes, let me talk about creative placemaking ethics for those of you who are planners or anybody who's interested in ethics. So American Institute of Certified Planners, anyone who is like me, a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, has to abide by an ethical code. I think this is a good code for anybody who works in community. But I'm going to talk about the parts of the code that are most relevant to creative placement. All right, and I'm going to just read this out. And for those of you who think, oh, planners, you know, they do terrible things. No, we care. We do good things. So, we shall have special concern for the long-range consequences of present action. Creative placemaking is, we think about community systems. We are intentional. We think about the future. We are humble enough to know that we are not, that neither us nor anybody else can accurately predict the future, but we are always thinking about it. We shall pay special attention to the interrelatedness of decisions. This goes back to the idea that we're not just talking about, we're not focused on projects, we're focused on impact. We're bringing people together. As difficult as it can be, and it can be difficult to do that. We shall give people, let me just do something. We shall give people the opportunity to have meaningful impact on development of plans and programs that may affect them. Participation should be broad enough to include those who lack formal organization or influence. So we're thinking, we're always thinking about who's not in the room, who should be in the room, whose voices haven't we heard. And again, I just want to repeat that we know we never get it right. We just try to be less wrong. That's, I think, the best anyone who works on community issues can do. So, so I want to thank you all for joining me today, and I still have 5 minutes. So if anybody has any comments or questions, please feel free to share. I'm hoping that what you heard today is that most of you, if not all of you, have said, yeah, I do that. That's how I think too. And if that's the case, then you, my friend, are a creative placemaker. Congratulations. So, any comments, any questions, any thoughts that you'd like to share? Okay, well, I'm not seeing anybody. So You know, they say that the key to having a great meeting is that you bring enough food, pretty good food, and you end 2 minutes early. Well, it's a webinar, so I couldn't really bring any food, but we could end 2 minutes early. So, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this, and please reach out if you have any questions to me, leo@cpcommunities.org. My number is 973-763-6352, extension 1. Remember, if you want to go to the Midwest Creative Placemaking Leadership Summit in Cincinnati in October 10th to 12th, you get a 20% discount by using code partner20. If we don't see you there, hopefully we'll see you at a webinar. We'll see you at another event. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed this. Bye.